Okay, joining us now, financier, political activist, former friend of Vladimir Putin, Bill Browder. Bill, very good to see you. Bill, what would you do with the Wagner Group? What way do you see this playing out?
Well, I think this has probably been one of the most dramatic weekends since Vladimir Putin took power in terms of challenging his authority. This guy, Yevgeny Prigozhin, was able to basically roll into Rostov and various other places towards Moscow unopposed, and this makes Putin look very, very weak. So, I mean, from Putin's perspective, he's got a big problem now, which is that this guy is potentially a challenger to him. This guy is a humiliator of him, and Putin can't afford to be humiliated. And so I think this strange deal to send him to Belarus is just is an interim measure. I can't imagine that Putin is going to just say, okay, all is forgiven. He can't do that without inviting other people to come have a go at him.
I think it's interesting to see the reaction of Lithuania, Latvia and Poland, the Baltic states. They seem alarmed almost more by Prigozhin than what's been happening most recently in Ukraine. I wonder what your assessment is of who's a bigger threat, really, to peace and stability in Europe, Putin or Prigozhin?
Well, I mean, they're both pretty horrible threats to everything. I mean, so what we've learned about Prigozhin over the last year is that he's one of the only capable military people in Russia. The regular Russian army is totally incapable. They're really, really bad. And what the Ukrainians have reported is that the only person they have any respect for in terms of on the other side is Prigozhin and Wagner. So it's very good news that Wagner is no longer and Prigozhin are no longer fighting Ukraine. It gives them a higher probability of success. And it's extremely worrying that this guy Prigozhin is now in another part of the world where it could be causing trouble to our allies in Lithuania, Latvia, and other places. Prigozhin has certainly caused a lot of problems in Africa. He's running mercenary operations in 17 countries there and is effectively the arm of Russia's foreign policy in that part of the world. And so God knows what he's going to do in Belarus. They're not wrong to be concerned about it. And we just have to see how this thing develops.
But, Bill, if they're an arm of Russia's foreign policy, is the party over? Is has the fallout between Prigozhin and Putin reached such a degree that they can't continue with a business relationship which I believe is worth £1 billion a year to the Wagner Group in terms of funding? How do you see that playing out if these two men have fallen out?
Well, it's an interesting question because normally if somebody had like organized an armed rebellion in Russia and was planning on taking over the Kremlin, they would have been arrested, taken to Red Square, put on a guillotine, and had their heads chopped off. I mean, I know many people in Russia who just get arrested on a tweet or some speech they've given. My good friend Vladimir Karamurza is in jail for 25 years for giving a speech about Russia, calling Putin a murderer and a war criminal. So the fact that Prigozhin is not only not in jail and not only not dead, but he's been sort of given this cushy exile, gives you a strong indication of how important he has been and probably continues to be to Russia's foreign policy. He's in a world of total incompetency on their side. He's the only guy who seems to have any competency at all. And so I would imagine, just based on what I've seen, that they can't get rid of him right now because, these 17 countries in Africa and whatever else he's got going on.
Is it cushy exile in Belarus, genuinely? I mean, we know that Lukashenko himself is not a particularly nice individual. In many ways, he is a puppet of Putin as well. How safe is Prigozhin there? And what's his role in all of this? Lukashenko's sort of become a bit of a kingmaker, hasn't he?
Well, he played some positive role as far as Putin is concerned last weekend, but I wouldn't be underestimating Prigozhin. He's the most cold-blooded, ruthless killer that exists in that part of the world today. This guy is, runs all of these killing operations, these mercenary operations, and so everybody has been asking me the question over the last 48 hours, like how safe is Prigozhin? I would respond by how safe are these other guys? I mean, this guy is truly a menace to the world. He's such a cold-blooded killer. He emptied out the entire prison of murderers to work for him. I mean, this guy is so dangerous. It's unbelievable. And so I would worry for them. I would say, how safe is Putin? How safe is Lukashenko? Because this guy is such a dangerous man.
Why is his army better than Putin's army? He's got less numbers. They seem to be better equipped. He does seem to have unquestioned loyalty from his men. How has he commanded that? Does money buy that?
Well, it's a combination of things. I mean, part of the whole thing is that he's just more brutal than anybody I've ever seen. There was some of his soldiers or one of his soldiers that I can think of had gone to the other side. He brought him back, and he then took a sledgehammer to his head and killed him live on a video, like an ISIS execution video, and then sent it all around Russia. I mean, he's truly the most brutal person. And so his brutality is what keeps people in line more than anything. And he is just, the most sadistic, brutal guy I've ever seen. And so perhaps that's what explains his loyalty and his effectiveness. Whatever it is, he's the only one in that part of the world that seems to be able to conduct a sort of organized, proper fight against the Ukrainians. Ukrainians are when they talk about the Russian army, they laugh, but when they talk about Prigozhin and Wagner, they're saying that these are the only people that they rate at all. And so for whatever skills he has, seems to work to keep people in line.
And Bill, he called that murder, the sledgehammer murder, as a dog's death for a dog, didn't he? Truly cold-blooded. I'm interested in the relationship between Putin and his chief of staff and his head of the defence force, Gerasimov and Shoigu. They were the people that actually Prigozhin claims most of his anger was directed at. And yet Putin has put his support behind them, hasn't he? I mean, there was a scenario, potentially was there at the weekend on Saturday, as this march towards Moscow was taking place, when Putin could have sided and collaborated with the mercenaries and got rid of Shoigu and Gerasimov?
Well, and that's entirely possible. And the way that Putin has always run his operations for the last 2 decades is keeping everybody on edge, not giving anybody an advantage, letting them fight it out among themselves. He's done this with oligarchs. He's done this with lots of other officials. But I think he got into a place with Prigozhin where Prigozhin was just getting too big and too powerful. And I don't think that Putin has a huge amount of respect for Gerasimov or Shoigu, his defense minister or the chief or defense chief. I think that he just wants to keep everybody on edge. And in doing so, his strategy, which has worked pretty well for him for the last 23 years, blew up in his face, where he had this one guy, Prigozhin, who just said, well, if you're going to keep me on edge and put these guys ahead of me, I'm going to march towards Moscow. And even though Prigozhin didn't succeed, the damage that he's done to Putin is incalculable. Putin is a strongman dictator who now looks weak. And it's very difficult to recover from a situation like that in a country where weakness is despised.
If you were Prigozhin, could you sleep easy? Or which one is more likely to have a disturbed sleep, Putin or Prigozhin?
Well, I think that Prigozhin lives in the most brutal world that ever exists. I don't think he ever sleeps peacefully because he's killed so many people and expects people to come at him. And so, he's probably got no different sleep than he ever has. But Putin is now in a terrible place, not just because of Prigozhin, but being president of Russia is the most profitable enterprise there ever is. And it's worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Every bad guy in Russia wants that money, wants that position. And all of a sudden, what Prigozhin has shown the world and his Russian compatriots is that there's a chink in the armor, that Putin is not all powerful, that you can just roll a bunch of tanks into Rostov and nobody will fire back at you, and they'll put roses on your tanks. And in putting that message out there to the Russian people, other people are going to have a go. There's no question that Putin, at this point, has to do something very dramatic to scare everybody back into their place, because that's how he's governed Russia for the last 23 years. Everybody has been scared. Now, all of a sudden, it doesn't look so scary.
Well, Bill, it's always fascinating to get your insights. Absolutely horrifying topic. We hope to talk to you again very soon. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. Thank you.